as rates have been going up. Remember I said to look at the 2-year treasury, the 10-year, 2-year inversion, which has always been typically a sign of a recession to come. That was 100 basis points inverted, with 2-year yield is 100 basis points higher than 10-year. Well, now we're down to about 17 to 20 basis points. So we are getting closer to being uninverted.
Get ready for a new episode of KP Talks Dollars and Cents. Learn financial literacy and get real-time updates on all things housing, finance, and real estate. So let's get started. Here's your host, Kevin Perenio.
Hey, it's KP coming to you live from LA. Just landed today, Friday. It's 3 o'clock. Had a medical emergency on our flight coming in. This poor little 85-year-old lady, she was unresponsive, and what a way to end conference season. She was okay, though. Ended up maybe being like some low blood sugar or low blood pressure. So 25-minute delay getting out of Newark. Was in Philly until yesterday morning. Got to go visit great people. Mike Cover's company, AMS, up in Iceland, New Jersey, and spoke to about 50 people at their sales rally. It was really awesome to talk to that group, talk about where the market's going, and just thank them for the great partnership over the years. And then had broke bread at Jose Tejas, nice little Mexican restaurant there with some Cajun food with our retail and wholesale managers, a couple guys up there in the area, and then went and visited a good friend of mine who lives up in Ringwood, right on Lake Erskine, see his little newborn baby. So nice way to end conference season and then haul ass home. And so I'm going to give you a couple more recaps from some things that went on at the Mortgage Banker Association National Convention in Philly, and talk about some of the stuff that's going on in the markets. And I will have an update next week. I know I haven't put out an update on my fix and flip in Culver City. I know that was kind of one of the storylines I put out here. We're set to close next week. So I am rushing home to get to a notary in an hour and 10 minutes who will be waiting at my house in 24. So for those that have scheduled meetings or dinners with me, you know that's kind of unfortunately how I roll. But we did have some worthy delays, medical reasons, and thank God that lady's okay. Great week. Last few days, had a panel just on origination, lead flow, and things going on in the business at the MBA convention. Had some good dinners, and want to thank Radian for sponsoring Tim McGraw and the meet and greet at the Mortgage Banker Association. It was pretty cool to see that. What are some takeaways? I want to show this chart. I'll probably do it Monday or maybe sometime next week. There's a chart of like human emotions when the markets go through all its different cycles, and euphoria is where we were a couple years ago, and we're just about a capitulation, and that's when the markets roll over and everyone just throws their hands up and says, F it, I'm done. I can't believe this. Rates are the highest they've been in X amount of years. This is the highest rates I've ever seen. I've been in the business since April of 2001, and this is the highest I've ever seen interest rates ever in my career, in my 22 and a half year career. Yes, I know there are people that have been here longer and seen rates higher, but remember, we've been going down since I started. Now we're going back up. So, there's a difference from going from 15 down to 12 or 12 down to 8. We're going up. And so it's the highest yields in X amount of years, the highest 10-year, the highest rates, and the worst this, and the best that, and the worst at this, all the extremes, right? Those extreme data points tend to have something break, and that's when you see economies and jobs roll over. So we're going to see, the labor market's interesting because we don't have a high participation rate of able-bodied working men and women of age. The labor rate's pretty low. It's like 78%, and historically we've been at 80%. That's a big number when you're talking about like 150 million workers. So not sure if the labor market's going to roll over anytime soon, in a massive way that the Fed wants. I know we're looking at data points all the time. We're looking at the 10-year treasury, and that's what we've been chasing. There's two big data points that I want to start getting on people's radar to see things kind of roll over. One is the 2-year yield. And I saw a very interesting clip from someone that said the last time the 10-year was elevated like this, the 2-year rolled over first. And that was kind of a sign that, all right, now we're going into it. Now we're going into that recessionary period. And remember, we've had an inverted 10-2 yield curve for quite some time. Remember, the inverted yield curve is like, hey, we think the economy's not going to be that great in the next few months or a year. Therefore, we demand a higher yield on a 2-year treasury. So, but when that 2-year starts to come down, while the 10-year remains elevated, that's a precursor and has been a past precursor of the economy rolling over and getting worse and going into recession. Remember, I reported on Monday that the Mortgage Bankers Association updated their economic forecast that Q1 and Q2 would be negative GDP growth and 3 Fed rate cuts next year. I do believe that the Fed will cut next year between March and July, at least the first time, and it can happen very quickly. Mortgage rates can move very quickly. 100 basis points easily on note rate, 200 basis points on mortgage-backed securities. It can happen in a week's time, so it could be very fast. Obviously, between then and now, whenever that is, we just got to keep grinding. I did mention that the second point we're starting to watch now is that the Fed Treasury, the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, who was the Fed president, she is putting out an announcement at the end of this month on how much our government needs to sell in the next quarter. So that includes new fundings of treasuries and refunding of old treasuries rolling off. And that number that they announced at the end of July caused the stock market to roll over and 10-year yields to rise. And so that's a big data point that's coming out in addition to watching the 2-year. That data point comes out soon. We've got inflation data next week. We've got new home sales next week. We've got GDP read next week. So we have a lot of data coming out next week, and I'll be back on my desk Monday, so I'll do an update. I'm off the road. Got one thing with Lenders One in La Jolla, their executive roundtable coming up the second week, I believe, in November. And then the California Mortgage Bankers Association, we have our end-of-year board meeting in Northern California the first week or second week, I believe, of December, first week of December. That's it. I'm back home, be from my desk, no more scenery. For you guys, I apologize. Maybe I'll walk a beach or something. One interesting point, Jerome Powell was talking yesterday and made some comments. And it was interesting. He was kind of hinting at the bond vigilantes or the bondanistas. Remember, if there's a buyer strike because we have too much debt, that's what these buyers of our treasuries are demanding a higher yield. That's why the 10-year treasury keeps going up, and that's why we're seeing mortgage interest rates go up to historic numbers not seen in over 22 and a half years. So let's watch those comments and see what the bond peeps do. I think we're in a Fed quiet zone, where they don't speak after Saturday at midnight this weekend until the next meeting, which is November 1st. And we'll see if the bondanistas, take on all these treasury auctions and buy this debt. I should leave one quote. I saw a really cool clip on Twitter. My buddy Martin Warren at Nations Direct sent me a clip of Mohamed El-Arian. He's chief economist for Allianz, one of the co-founders of Bill Gross of PIMCO, based right in Newport Beach where I live. He has a home in Corona del Mar, not too far from Martin. And he said that we've lost our policy anchor, our monetary anchor, and our technical anchor. So it's very interesting. Is the Fed data dependent? When are they going to stop saying they're data dependent and say they're done? We've never seen such parabolic moves in the treasury or mortgage interest rates like this, and so it's a very unhealthy market. It's dislocated. It's not orderly, and so I will say there's only 2 Fed meetings left, November 1st, and then I think December 15th. Remember, this next meeting on the 1st, there is no dot plot, there is no economic projection, but the next one at the end of the year, there is. So my guess is whether another 25 basis points gets done or not, the Fed is done at the end of this year at the second meeting. And then going into next year, we go into recession watch as opposed to when's the next rate hike? Is there going to be one? What will it be? When will it be? That part of the cycle will be over. And that's actually a level of certainty which bond investors are looking for. What's the terminal rate of the cost of money? How much do we have to buy to fund what? Another, $2 trillion in deficit this year? So anyway, have a great weekend. Cheers. Hey, it's KP coming to you live from Corona, California. First time back at the desk in 3 weeks. Been on the road like crazy. Not going to rehash my travels with you. But it is scorpion season. So for
Those of you deviants out there wearing all black, you know who you are. This is your time to shine. You got Halloween coming up next week, and you can make the most of that. It's also Rangers season, as they just dominated the Astros on their home turf. For those of us from the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, we love beating Houston at things. So bye-bye. All right. So I was at the Mortgage Banker Association last week and had some great comments I heard from Bob Brooksmith. I'll kind of go with those in a second. I'm going to touch on some social media comments that are being made out there and what I think of social media. And just a reminder, I only do 2 videos a week. So I do Monday night like tonight, and I do Thursday typically. So if you see too much of me or whatever, I apologize in advance. So every time I meet someone in person, they tell me about my videos, I say thank you for watching them, and I'm sorry. So, but I just do 2 10-minute videos a week. That's it. So I'm hoping I'm not taking up too much of your time, trying to provide value and create a sense of community here. And you ambitious vendors out there trying to take advantage for your own selfish reasons of my engagement, you're welcome. But it's all good. I really want more engagement. So just be civil and nice. All right. So the Fed has 3 mandates. Did you know that? Did you know the Fed has 3 mandates? It's not just maximum employment and stable prices, thus fighting inflation. They have a 3rd mandate, and it is moderate long-term interest rates. Did you know that? It's not a dual mandate. It's a 3-part mandate. Moderate long-term interest rates. So the 10-year Treasury wildly swinging 20 basis points within a day is not moderate by any means. It's very volatile. It shows a lot of uncertainty. And as we watch the duration of the yield curve, now we see longer-term bonds, like 30-year bonds, start to rise, although not necessarily too high by historical means. Does that meet the mandate? And so I saw that the CME Fed Watch tool, which is kind of like a barometer of where they think the Fed will go on their next meeting, November 1st. It's like a 96.5% chance they're going to stay put and there'll be no raise next week when the Fed speaks, which, by the way, they're in their quiet period all week. No Fed speakers are speaking now as of midnight on Saturday. So we will hear them next week after their meeting. And what are they going to say about moderate long-term interest rates? Fed Chair Powell spoke about the bondinistas and the bond vigilantes trying to force their hand. And in kind of a cryptic message, will he say more about that in the press conference at the end of next week? And this wild volatility with the 10-year bond ever since they said, we're going to keep rates higher for longer. And the dot plot, the SEP, their economic projections, which they don't put out another one until the December 13th meeting, they said that they're going to go higher. Their terminal rate was going to be 5.6. 12 of the 19 voting members said they're going to be higher, at least one more 25 basis point rate higher from now. And that freaked out everybody. And then you have a buyer strike. You got China and Japan not buying as much of our treasuries when we're flooding the market with treasuries. And don't forget, at the end of this month, Treasury Secretary Yellen, former Fed Chair Yellen, as her Secretary of Treasury role, will announce how many treasuries need to fund in the next quarter. So how much are they going to force onto the world and keep interest rates moderate? So that is part of their triple mandate. And if you think the Fed doesn't care about the dollar strength or being the reserve currency of the world, you're absolutely crazy. They work for the United States. They are our, Federal Reserve. So, we want to be in power. The United States, this is a power play. And so they're absolutely part of what they do every day. And so I find it funny, some of the comments out there that disagree with that, but they're all intertwined, right? They don't just fight inflation or just fight employment. They also need to keep moderate long-term interest rates in addition to fund our government and help sell treasuries and provide repo facilities and, reissue bonds that are expiring and plus create liquidity and park money over here, in these, third-party LLCs that get created during the financial crisis to make sure that the dollar and the financial global system doesn't collapse. They do a lot. So anyway, that's not really a debate, but discuss it down below. It's all good. Earnings week is a big deal. The mega cap stocks, they all, are announcing earnings this week. Why does it matter to us? I am not a financial advisor. I'm not responsible for your losses, only your profits. But there's a lot of liquidity in these top 7 stocks that are out there. And when they talk about their earnings for Q3, they also give guidance. You don't think it's important to know what Amazon thinks of the consumer when we're 70% consumer GDP-driven economy? I want to know what Amazon thinks. I want to know, what Apple thinks. All you out there with your iPhones, yes, I have an Android, don't at me. I am a contrarian. But, what Apple thinks about the consumer. Maybe they're not buying as much hardware, but they're still buying stuff online. The baby boomers are loaded. I mean, the baby boomers have something like 75 trillion of the $150 trillion in net worth of our United States economy. I mean, they're half our net worth. They're the haves out there. So in the next 20 years, they'll be handing their net worth over to millennials. And, how are those consumer habits, going to change the way that the 70% of our consumer-driven economy evolves when that transfer of wealth comes over? We have a dysfunctional government. Bob Brooks had said something amazing about that in his comments. And I just want to read some of his comments I thought were pretty good from the NBA's opening comments. He said, we're taking the message to Washington, leaders in Washington every day. Right now, the most important battle we're fighting is on interest rates. And so talking about how consumers can't afford 8% rates. And they said that Washington, D.C. is fighting us. We have a dysfunctional government, can't pass legislation, can't pass budget. Hell, they don't have a Speaker of the House. So I love the fact the NBA is being very active on that. And, that is a big part of why rates are going up and Treasury yields have been going up. And so, this all is intertwined with the way our mortgage interest rates occur every day, what goes on with them. I mentioned a comment last week about Mohamed El-Arian, chief economist for Allianz, co-founder of PIMCO. Great speaker. He's got some good comments on there. He's on LinkedIn, by the way. He's got great commentary on LinkedIn. You ought to follow him on LinkedIn. Talking about the volatility of the 10-year bond. Remember, he said, the market has lost its policy anchor, technical anchor, and economic anchor. We have lost the Fed. We're losing China. Institutional investors are underwater. We lost them. We may have lost Japan. That and some of this heightened rhetoric from the NBA trying to go after, the Fed to move their interest rate policy. Some of the comments I see here, on LinkedIn, from people out there, it's like it reminds me of capitulation. So, check out the capitulation chart. You can just Google image search it. Optimism, enthusiasm, exhilaration, then euphoria. That was our markets back when things were great and liquidity was everywhere. Then you have unease, denial, pessimism, panic. We're almost to panic. I mean, some people are panicking right now. It's a tough industry right now. Our housing industry is in a tough spot. And so after that panic comes that capitulation where you come to despair. And so as leaders of organizations, of course we have a plan. Of course we take detailed account of what to do. We're running a real operation here, and there's a lot of great leaders who run operations. So, some of you with your workflow engines that want to take shots on social media, I applaud you, and I love you biting off everyone's engagement. And I kind of kid, but I know you're selfishly promoting your product. I had a hot dog salesman promote their product from Miami on some of my posts a couple times in the past. Thought it was pretty awesome. But yeah, we all have a plan. We have details. We just don't have time to talk about it in 10 minutes here and give away, all of our secret sauce. But we have to be positive in light of everything that's going on. And then there will be hope and there'll be relief and we'll be back to optimism. Have a fantastic week. Inflation data, PCE coming out, GDP numbers, tons of data. This is an awesome week. Let's go. Cheers. Hey, it's KP coming to you live from Corona, California. Well, we have a ton of news coming out. And I'll get into that. 3 huge data points, all within a week's time to the minute. We have our yearly 501c3, the PRMG Cares, it's our charity, our 501c3. We have our yearly auction for Caleb Malice's artwork. That's Gary Malice, one of our 4 partners here, one of my partners. He and I joined this firm after our 2 founders, Paul and Robert, found the company over 22 years ago. And Gary's son, Caleb, creates original art pieces, which are just unique, amazing. And there'll be a link down below as of tomorrow at 10 a.m. Where the auction opens up and you can buy original artwork and even order some prints. So I'll showcase some of that in just a second. And then also I'll give you an update on the house, my first house that me and my partners, Jason and Britt, we built together in Culver City. It's our first fix and flip, and it's sold and closed today, and the wire's in the bank. It's a cool little story that involves the Altman brothers from $1 Million Listing, if you're familiar with them. So let's get into the data. So we've had a lot that's come out this week. New home sales came out this week, and it's a really high annualized number, like 759,000 new home sales. It's a pretty high pace. We haven't seen that pace since, maybe 06. Obviously in 2021 we saw a lot, but the new home sales pace is enormous, and it's just continues to make up for the lack of existing home sales pace, which is still a decent clip. It's under 4 million annualized at this point, existing home sales. But new home sales are where it's at, right? So people are locked in with their lower rates. They're not moving, the existing home sellers. So people are buying new construction, even with high rates. So, even though our housing, industry is in a full-blown recession, and this is about the toughest I've seen, since 2007 and 8. Certainly it's a slower burn now than 08, where everyone just went out of business. We're still grinding. So we're grinding right now, and the data shows it. Now, the GDP number came out today. Now, it's very interesting because 4.9% gross domestic product in Q3. That's massive growth. So everything's great, right? There's no underlying problems. We're not going into recession. Not so fast. So, when you have GDP, which is gross domestic product, based mostly on consumer spending, about 70% of it. Remember, the boomers, $75 trillion, half of our country's $150 trillion of net worth, are owned by baby boomers who are retiring every day. They have savings and they are spending, and it's showing up. Now, that could mask some underlying problems with our economy, where you have, the poor economic, parts of our economy are getting hurt by higher interest rates. They're getting hurt with continuing jobless claims. We saw 1.79 million continuing jobless claims, over 200,000, I believe it was 210,000 initial jobless claims that came out today. And the continuing jobless claims are at 1.79. So that went up. So there's some underlying issues with jobs. And one of those 3 data points we're going to get in the next week is next Friday, when we get the October BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics jobs report. So that's a big data point that's coming out. Now, what's interesting is in that 4.9% GDP number, not only was there a lot of consumer spending, but there were a lot of government spending going on. And, that is part of why the treasury yields are so high. There's just this, this glut of government spending. Our deficit's 5% of our GDP right now, our yearly deficit from our budget. But that government spending was a big part of the GDP. And, will that come back at some point? Will a budget ever get passed? Will there be a new administration next year or not? A new Congress or House next year or not? In an election year that could bring that spending down? I don't know. I don't really know. But that GDP number was pretty interesting, and because we saw a couple years ago where things like inventory in Q3 GDP that is going up to stock up for all these companies that want to have high retail sales in Q4, the holiday season. So inventory doesn't ramp up like it did in Q3 every quarter. So my point is, we've seen as we ended Q3 and Q4 of 2021 with really high GDP numbers, and then the first 2 quarters of 2022, we had negative GDP. And are we setting up for a same kind of cycle? Remember, I was at the NBA last week, and the team, Mike Pratt, Tony, Marina Walsh, Joel Kahn, they called for Q1 and Q2 of next year to have negative GDP, thus causing slower growth and the Fed to then cut 3 times. So we will watch out for that. Now, what's interesting is inside the Q3, just the Q3 GDP number that came out, there is a PCE number for the quarter. Now, PCE is personal consumption expenditure, the Fed's preferred inflation gauge, which is coming out tomorrow for a year look back. So there's some lagging indicator. But within the Q3 GDP read, there is a PCE component for just this most recent quarter. Now, 4% was the PCE read, but the core PCE, where you strip out food and energy. And remember, in personal consumption expenditure, there's not as much of a housing component as there is in the CPI number, which, by the way, I knew that, but was reminded by my good friend Barry Habib when I watched his MBS Highway today. But the PCE core reading for just Q3 was 2.4%. 2.4%. 2.4% in the last 3 months was the inflation reading. That's pretty damn close to the 2% target that the Fed keeps talking about. Are they looking at this number, or are they going to continue to look at lagging data? They're going to look at the number tomorrow that comes out for personal consumption expenditure, which replaces September of 2022's number with September of 2023 that we just had number, and have a 12-month look back. That number could be 3.7%, on the core reading, stripping out food and energy. So are we whipping inflation or are we not? Are we at 3.7 or 2.4? You want to look at 12 months back or you want to look at 3 months back? I don't know. I'd rather look at 3 months back, just saying, considering that the rates are way higher and more sufficiently restrictive than they have been certainly 12 months ago if you're going to look at lagging data. But I digress. Anyway, PCE coming out tomorrow. Fed speaking next week. Are they going to rile the markets again? Remember, the Fed said last meeting, at the same time when they put the dot plot, the SEP, the economic projections, they said higher for longer. And we think we're going to be at 5.6, which is another 25 basis point rate hike. Are they going to raise tomorrow, or are they going to raise on December 13th? Or maybe they're done raising completely, or maybe we're not going to know. But to next week's meeting, the November 1st meeting, whether they raise or not, will not have a new dot plot, because every other meeting they skip. So whether they do or don't, we're still going to have uncertainty because we won't have a new updated dot plot showing what they think the terminal rate would be until December 13th. So if they raise next week, everyone will think they'll be done at that point. If they don't raise, they will still be worried that they might do another 25 basis points December 13th, which if you look at the CME Fed Watch tool, there is a 20% chance that there will be in December 13th a 25 basis point rate hike. And it says that there's no chance in the meeting next week that there'll be a rate hike. So we'll look for the language. We'll see what actually happens, but we won't have a dot plot. So we'll go from there. Now, by the way, as rates have been going up, remember I said to look at the 2-year treasury, the 10-year, 2-year inversion, which has always been typically a sign of a recession to come. That was 100 basis points inverted, with 2-year yield is 100 basis points higher than 10-year. Well, now we're down to about 17 to 20 basis points. So we are getting closer to being uninverted. I said a couple weeks ago, watch that 2-year. Watch the 2-year. It is a sign of slowing growth and that we are getting closer to actual recession. All right. We know that as rates went up, 5 million borrowers were out of the market when rates went from 7 to 8%. And since 2021, 28 million borrowers have been priced out of this market. The administration and all the regulators want, to serve the underserved and get all these new borrowers in the houses, yet this rate regime keeps pricing people out. But I digress. Okay. This is a cool piece with nobody famous, just some random people that Caleb Malice put together. We have an awesome Bruce Lee. This is a massive one. These are originals. And Marilyn Monroe. So look out for the link tomorrow. We'll get out there. Have a great weekend. Cheers.
You've been listening to KP Talks Dollars and Cents, a top-rated show for those who want to learn about the economy and mortgage environment. Tune in each week for more episodes, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Kevin Perenio does not render or offer to render personalized investment or tax advice through KP Talks Dollars and Cents. The information provided is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial, tax, investment, or legal advice. For more info, follow KP Talks Dollars and Cents on all of our social channels.